Do you find that you freeze up when it comes time to speak Spanish with a native speaker? Are you afraid that you won't know what to say or that you'll simply talk too slowly to keep up with the conversation? If that's you, you'll definitely want to stay tuned for this episode. I'm interviewing Ryan, who is actually a member of the Spanish Consulsa community, and he talks about how he went from freezing up during his first language exchange and not knowing what to say at all to being able to have conversations with native Spanish speakers during his last trip abroad. So definitely check this out if you're someone who struggles with having conversations in Spanish, no matter how long you've been learning the language. This episode is for you. I think you will find Ryan's story inspiring. Así que vamos a empezar. Let's get started.
Bienvenidos. Welcome to the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast, the show for Spanish learners that love music, travel, and culture. Close your grammar textbooks, shut down the language apps, and open your ears to how Spanish is spoken in the real world. Let us show you how to go from beginner to bilingual. Here is your host, certified language coach, Tamara Marie.
I'm super excited about today's episode because this is one of my favorite things to do. Being able to share a story of someone who's overcome some of their challenges when it comes to speaking Spanish. To me, it's really important to be able to hear stories from people who may be struggling with something that you're struggling with right now, but really finding out the strategies that they've used to be able to move past it. So I know a lot of times it can seem intimidating when you see someone who already speaks the language fluently and you feel like you'll never get to where they are. But when you hear a story from someone like Ryan, you really get to see, wow, he was able to do that in just a short amount of time, so maybe I can overcome this too. So I'm really excited to share Ryan's story. In our conversation, we cover so many different things, from his strategies to how he got from being very nervous and shy about speaking Spanish to actually being able to have conversations with native speakers. And Ryan is a member of our Spanish Consulsa community. And if you didn't already know, today we are opening the doors officially to new members. So if you've been struggling to stay consistent with your progress towards Spanish fluency, or if you just don't have anyone to speak Spanish with on a regular basis where you live, being part of the Spanish Consulsa Fluency Club will give you the direction and motivation you need so that you can make consistent progress. Whether you're a beginner or an intermediate Spanish learner, this membership is for you. We'll help you identify what skills you need to improve and give you a customized weekly plan based on your level. So if you want more support to reaching conversational fluency in Spanish, you are more than welcome to join us. This week only, we're offering a special for new members. I'll talk more about that at the end of the episode, but for now, let's get into my conversation with Ryan. He'll share the number one feature of the Spanish Consulsa Fluency Club that was an absolute game changer for him, and his advice for how to gain confidence speaking Spanish. Hola, Ryan. Bienvenido a Spanish Consulsa.
Hola, Tamara.
Thank you so much for taking time to join me today. And I wanted to introduce you to our audience because a lot of times I get questions from listeners of the podcast that want to know, how do I find time to learn Spanish, or where do I get started, right? If they're a beginner, they might be listening to the podcast in Spanish and feel like that's too hard. So they're looking for how do I get started? So first, before we get into that though, I just wanted to ask you, what made you get started learning Spanish in the first place? What made you interested in learning the language?
Yeah, so what inspired me to learn Spanish is when I was traveling around Europe a couple years ago. I was in Spain with a group of other travelers, other backpackers, and a majority of them knew how to speak Spanish. And seeing their experience, knowing Spanish, being able to ask for directions in Spanish and order food in Spanish, I thought it was really cool. And from that moment, I told myself, I am going to learn Spanish.
So how long ago was that? When did you first get your inspiration to want to start learning Spanish?
Yeah, so that was about 2 years ago in 2018, and I started learning Spanish a couple months after. So in January 2019, it was my New Year's resolution to begin learning Spanish that year.
Oh, very cool. So you had a New Year's resolution that you actually followed through with, right?
Yes. It's just very rare.
Yeah, that's really rare, right? So you came back, you started, that was your New Year's resolution. So what was the first thing you did to get started with Spanish?
Yeah, so this was my first time pretty much learning a language. I grew up in a bilingual household. We spoke English and Laos at home, but this was my first time learning another language as not my native language. So I did what most people probably do is I started with Duolingo. And the first 4 or 5 months or so, I was primarily learning Spanish with Duolingo.
Okay, and how far did you get with Duolingo? Because I know they have the different levels and you get the little trophy. So how far along did you get?
Yeah, so I'm still using Duolingo, but I'm using it as a supplement to my studies now. I'm about halfway done through the tree.
All right, so you were learning with Duolingo, so I imagine you were making some progress there. So what did you feel like you had to do next to really become conversational? Because I think, like you said, most people, you Google like how to learn Spanish and then, Duolingo is free. So a lot of people start there. So what was your next step when you realized like after a few months that, all right, I need to go beyond Duolingo if I want to be fluent in Spanish?
Yeah, so I would say 4 or 5 months into my Spanish learning journey, I did my first language exchange through an application called HelloTalk, where you can connect with other language learners. And I was really confident. At first, I was really confident. I was learning through Duolingo. My streak was really high. I think I was at like a 70-day streak. So at first, I was really confident. And once I got into the language exchange, I completely froze. I did not understand what my conversation partner was saying. I did not know how to respond. And from that moment, I knew that I needed to learn more with native Spanish speakers, and learning by myself, it's great, but really I needed to practice speaking a lot more. So from that moment on, I knew that I needed to be more confident in speaking with native speakers.
Wow, that's interesting. So you kind of froze up. I think, I had a similar experience when I started traveling for the first time. And you talked about being overly confident.
Yeah.
Well, I was like, I took Spanish in high school. Like, I know what I'm talking about. I can at least get through, customs and immigration, right? When I get in the airport, I know like basic vocabulary. And the same thing happened to me. I had no idea what was going on because people were just speaking too fast. And I was like, those aren't the words I'm expecting to hear, because you read in the book like they're supposed to say these words, right? Why aren't they saying the words that are in the book? So I definitely had that experience too. So then what shifted for you? So I want to ask, because you joined our community in Spanish Consulsa, so how did you find us and what made you want to join in the first place?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I primarily started learning with Duolingo, and about 5 months into my studies, I knew a bunch of random phrases or words, but I really could not hold a basic conversation, and it was very frustrating. And at that point, I knew that I needed to change my learning approach. I knew that I needed more structure in my learning and that I needed to surround myself more with native speakers. And I became aware of Spanish Consulsa through the podcast, actually.